Alright, hello my friends, and welcome back to my ultimate item tier list for Brotato. Hope you're all doing well. So in part 1, which you can see up on the screen, I covered the tier 1 items, and in part 2 we're going to cover the tier 2, that's the rare items, the blue items that show up at level 2 in the shop. Also, just a quick couple corrections, so Piercing Bullet was missing from the tier list last time, so I just added it in, and you can see that it has landed in A tier, and also Turret and Scared Sausage I somehow missed, and also none of you caught that, so shame on all of you for not noticing that I had just missed those two items. But we've added them in A tier because Turret you will build anytime you're doing engineering, and in D tier respectively because Scared Sausage only goes with basically one character. All right, without further ado, let's get into it. Let me quickly, actually, here's a little bit of further ado. I'm just going to quickly reiterate what these categories denote, just so you have that fresh in your mind. So for S tier items, you are going to be buying these pretty much every time they show up in the shop. A tier items you'll buy if you use the stats, because the downsides are generally minimal, and so even if it's a downside that you in a stat you care about, you'll still buy these items if you care about the positive stats basically at all. B tier items usually have bigger downsides but also still significant upsides, so you'll buy them most of the time, but you'll have to weigh whether the downside is worth it. C tier items are situational, sort of build filler, which you'll pick up if they're offered for free at the end of a wave or dependent on certain circumstances. Something like the weird ghost you may or may not buy, basically because it's super dangerous to purchase. D tier items are pretty much only useful for one character or one or two characters, very narrow items that you're very rarely going to buy. And F tier items you will never buy ever. Alright, let's get on into it. So, the first item is Acid. This gives 8 HP and minus 4% dodge. I will be reading out the stats of the items, but if you want to follow along like on the wiki, just go to the wiki, sort by rarity. That's probably the easiest way to do that. Acid definitely has a real downside, but max HP is good, so I'm going to stick that in B tier. Next up, Alien Eyes. Alien Eyes shoot 6 little projectiles around you that do half of your health in damage every 3 seconds, and that's okay, but for the most part, I think these are a D tier item. There's a couple circumstances where they're good, and there's some characters that build tons of health that can get a lot of use out of them. They also have some additional synergy if you're going for a fire build or have a lot of bouncing projectiles, but for the most part, these items just aren't worth it. Bait, I think, is a B tier item. It definitely has a real downside, and there are waves where you won't want to take it. Something to often consider with bait, if you're not sure about like an elite wave that's coming up, you could lock it in the shop and then take it for the subsequent wave, rather than buying it for a wave where you think it's going to be really dangerous. Banner gives you 20 range and 10% attack speed for minus 2% lifesteal. I think that these are... Attack speed's obviously great. It's one of the best stats in the game. But these are sort of marginal enough bonuses combined with the fact that losing lifesteal is pretty painful. I think Banner is a C tier item. Black Belt gives you 25% XP gain and 3 melee damage for minus 8 luck. So that's a pretty significant penalty. But a reasonable bonus. Extra XP gain is extra economy, and you know how much I love economy. And minus 8 luck is definitely painful. I think you'll mostly buy Black Belt if you also use the melee damage. But for the most part, I think you're likely to pass on this in the shop about like half the time you see it. So that's a C tier item. Blindfold. 5% crit chance, 5% dodge for minus 15% range. That's an A tier item. It might even be S tier. Minus 15 range is like barely a penalty. Most characters don't care about decreasing their range at all, and I think you'll basically buy Blindfold every time you see it, because stacking range penalties can get severe if you've bought too many other items that decrease your range. I'm going to put that under A rather than under S, but for the most part I think that item is very good. Blood Leech gives you 2% lifesteal and 2 regeneration for minus 4 harvesting. I think this is a B tier item. If you are lifesteal specifically, it's much better than harvesting, because lifesteal is more expensive to get than harvesting, or than HP regeneration. But -4 harvesting is a real penalty. It costs you 4 materials plus the compound interest per wave for the rest of the game, in addition to whatever you pay for it. And the bonuses are nice, but still marginal. I think you'll pretty much buy this almost every time if you're going lifesteal, rarely if you're going a regeneration, and never if you're going consumable healing. Next up, the campfire. Okay, that has shown up down here. Campfire is 2 elemental damage and 2 HP regeneration for -2% speed. I think even if you're going elemental damage, Campfire is a C tier item because -2% speed is a real penalty. And I guess if you're going specifically elemental damage and HP regeneration, you're going to take this, but you're going to pass on it enough of the time that I think it's a C tier item. Cog, I also happened to see this one down at the bottom. 4 engineering for -4% damage. I mean, if you're going engineering, you're going to buy this all the time, so there it goes. Compass. I have to find my place again. Alright, here's Compass. Gives you 5% speed and 3 engineering for -3% crit chance. Even if you're not going engineering, Compass is really solid. 5% speed is a pretty solid buff, and it's actually pretty hard to get speed in the shop. You'll mostly end up getting speed from level ups, so adding items that give you optionality to get speed in the shop is really good. If you haven't won a run with Explorer to unlock Compass, you should probably do that. I think it will improve your shops overall to have access to this. Cyberball, just like the baby elephant, it's basically the same item, is a D tier item. It gives you a 25% chance to deal a quarter of your luck in damage to a random enemy when an enemy dies. So it will trigger slightly more often than the elephant, usually depending on how much material you're picking up, but for the most part it's the same item, and you should buy it only if you are a luck-based build. Cyclops Worm gives you 12% damage for -12 range. I think this is just a really solid pile of stats, great ratio. That's an S tier item right there. Alright, Dangerous Bunny gives you free rerolls in the shop. This will pay for itself super quickly. That's another S tier item. Energy Bracelet gives you 4% crit chance and 2 elemental damage for -2 ranged damage. So, obviously, if you're going elemental damage, you're going to take this. You might even take it if you're melee damage, just for the 4% crit chance. If you're ranged damage, of course, you'll never take it, so we'll put it in A tier. Eye Surgery. Burning activates 10% faster, and you lose 10 range. Where's Eye Surgery here? Oop, did I lose that item? Oh, here it is. Alright. Hard to keep track sometimes as I'm going through these. Anyways, this is just another one for the fire build. If you're building fire, you'll take Eye Surgery. If not, then you won't. Fuel Tank gives you 4 elemental damage for -1 melee, -1 ranged. I mean, that's a great ratio if you're going elemental damage, so that's an A tier item. Gambling Token gives you 8% dodge for -1 armor, which, again, I think is an A tier item. In general, -1 armor is a real penalty, but dodge is really good, and you get a really good ratio. Basically, you can think of this as losing 1 armor increases all incoming damage by 7%, because that's how armor stacks. It linearly reduces incoming damage by 7% per point, and compounding with itself. And 8% dodge effectively increases your max HP by 8%, but dodge scales well with itself, and armor scales linearly, dodge scales multiplicatively, and armor scales linearly, so you want more dodge than armor typically. Both is good though, but this is a good ratio, so you'll take it more or less every time. Garden is an item that I think I have been mostly underrating. I will say there is not the downside of Garden, so Garden just every 15 seconds spawns a consumable on the ground. It sounds like an item that would be an S tier because it's got basically no listed downside, but the downside of Garden is just the opportunity cost. So I think this is a B tier item. It's very good, but it's often very expensive to purchase, so you'll buy it in a decent percentage of runs, but don't be afraid to skip it if you don't need the extra healing or are looking for something more specific. Incendiary Turret. This one I'm actually going to also place in B tier, because I think there are times when you're going engineering where this is too expensive. It's the worst of the turrets, and it does its damage over time. It also doesn't work with the burning build, which the other turrets all do. So Incendiary Turret I think is slightly worse than normal turret or laser turret. We're going to put that in B tier for now. Leather Vest. That's an S tier item if I've ever seen one. It gives you 2 armor, 6% dodge for -3 max HP. That will basically always be worth it. Super efficient, great for your stats. Little Frog is 20% pickup range, 10 harvesting for -5% dodge. I think this is... -5% dodge is a real penalty. And the 20% pickup range is okay on some classes, but 10 harvesting is, of course, very good. So I think I probably underbuy this a little just because I'm afraid of lowering my dodge. But if you're not going for a dodge build, you can buy Little Frog just for the harvesting. Little Muscly Dude. That is 3 melee damage and 5 max HP for -15 range. I think this is an A tier item. If you use both stats, like the melee damage and the HP, you'll always buy it. Even if you just want the HP, sometimes you'll buy it, because losing range doesn't matter for most characters. Lure. Lure may not be in this list. I think this tier list was made before some of the more recent items were added. So let me fix that real quick. We're just going to add Lure. It's going to go in S tier. Forgive me doing some... just a little bit of in-page editing. All right, we will copy the image link from the wiki. Ta-da! All right, we've got Lure. All right. Anyways, Lure is an S tier item. It gives you 3 health regeneration, but more importantly, it gives you 2 additional loot aliens spawn in the next wave. That's just free value. You will always make your money back from this. It's really good. Even if you don't end up killing the loot aliens, you still got some HP regeneration, so all's not lost, but for the most part, you will take Lure whenever you see it. If your build is coming together at all, you should be able to clear those guys. All right. Mastery. This gives you 6 melee damage in exchange for -3 ranged damage, and that is another A tier item, of course. If you're melee, you're going to grab it every time. Metal. This is an S tier item. Gives you just a big pile of stats at a very efficient rate. 3 max HP, 3% damage, 1 armor, 3% speed for -4% crit chance. You're going to buy it basically every time. Medical Turret. So I think this is another item that looks a little worse than it is, and it's actually really, really good. But similar to Garden, we're going to put it in B tier. There are times when you skip it. It's maybe a little better than Garden overall, just because it heals more frequently. Actually, I'm going to bump it up a tier. It heals more frequently than Garden, and even if you are reducing your engineering, it'll still heal 2 points usually. It's really good. Great source of additional healing. I think you'll buy it most of the time that you see it. Metal Detector gives you a 5% chance to double the value of your picked up materials, and this includes the XP gain from those materials, so that's important to keep in mind. Gives you 6 luck and 2 engineering for -5% damage. I think this is basically always worth it, unless it's late in the wave. So I'm going to put it in B tier, but I will say you should take this pretty much every time you see it, unless it's like wave 15 or later. Metal Plate is +2 armor for -3% damage. Great ratio. Every character wants that. Missile gives you +10% damage for -4% attack speed. So that is an okay ratio. This is one that has good upsides, but real significant downsides. I think you'll skip on Missile often enough that I'm going to place it in C tier. Padding gives you 3 max HP and plus 1 max HP for every 100 materials you have for minus 5% speed. I think there's only like 1 or 2 characters that don't want to spend all their materials every single wave, and on those characters, like let's take the streamer for example, the minus 5% speed is a huge penalty for the streamer who really desperately needs to increase their speed. So I think even on the characters this item is built for, it's garbage. I'm putting it in F tier. Piggy bank. This is one that I underrate, I think, a little bit. I've actually mentioned that in my most recent class guide, that I think piggy bank will pay for itself pretty quickly most of the time. So I'm going to put it in A tier, similar to, or in B tier, similar to the metal detector. You're going to buy it often in early waves, and if you get the piggy bank, you can try to like keep 100 in the bank just to have it pay for itself. And after a couple waves, it will start giving you money pretty quickly. So it's an investment, and you have to do a little math, which is why I usually don't like to buy it. But I think you'll buy it more often than not. Pocket Factory. Oh no, we're missing Pocket Factory as well. All right. Well, Pocket Factory is going to be in C tier. This is a pet item of mine. I guess I actually just can paste again. Paste. Oh no, wait. I'm not using hotkeys for doing this because all my hotkeys control my streaming setup. So if you are, if you're being driven berserk by my copy pasting by hand, know that I too am being driven berserk by my copy pasting by hand. Whoops. All right, hang on. Copy image link. Give me that. There we go. All right. Problem solved. Sorry about this little technical mishap, but hopefully it will at least be kind of fun. Anyways, Pocket Factory is a C tier item. This is a personal pet item of mine, but in general, I think I buy it too often, and you should buy it a little less than I do. Obviously, it's only upside, and you'll always buy it if you are a character that wants to generate turrets, but no, we're gonna put that in A tier just because it fits the definition of an A tier item in that if you're going any engineering build, you'll always buy Pocket Factory, and it's actually slightly better than that just in general because it gives you a little bit of additional, a little bit of additional value on many other characters. So there's a lot of other characters that also kind of want the Pocket Factory. All right, Pumpkin gives you plus 15% piercing damage for minus 2% damage. If you're any ranged build, you're going to buy the Pumpkin because you want to buy Pierce. Recycling Machine is plus 35% more materials from recycling items. So something that I didn't realize about Recycling Machine is that that's 35% of the total cost of the item, not 35% on top of what you would normally get. So this item actually generates a ton of value whenever you open crates at the end of a wave. If it's an item you don't want, you get tons of extra materials from the Recycling Machine. It will pay for itself super quickly and start generating money. Recycling Machine is an S tier item. Riposte, if you're going melee, you should probably always just buy Riposte. So we're going to put that in A tier. Ritual is 6% damage and 2% lifesteal for minus 2 engineering. That is a great ratio, and you should absolutely keep an eye out for Ritual. I suppose technically it's not S tier because engineering builds probably don't use the damage or the lifesteal, so we'll put it in A tier, but basically every character wants Ritual whenever they see it. Scope. 2 ranged damage and plus 25 range for minus 7% attack speed. This is, I think, a D tier item. Attack speed is really, really good, and while you do want plus 2 ranged damage on ranged characters, minus 7% attack speed means it probably decreases your damage overall to take this on almost every character. Some characters like the one-armed or something that start with a ton of bonus attack speed, or if you already have a lot of attack speed, it might be more valuable. So I'm not going to put it in F, but I will say that scope is a really bad ratio for the stats that you get, and range doesn't matter. Shady Potion is 20 luck for -2 HP regeneration. I love me some luck. You should grab that every time you see it. Small Magazine, so this is sort of the opposite of the scope, gives you +2 range damage, +10% attack speed for -6% damage. That is a tremendously high value set of stats. Great amount for the cost, so if you're ranged, you'll always buy that. Snail. So I have seen a lot of people rate Snail very low. I think Snail is actually really good because 5% lower movement speed for -3% your speed sounds like you're not getting a lot of value out of that, right? You're only increasing your speed relative to the enemies by 2%, and this doesn't slow down their projectiles, so you're not getting more able to dodge projectiles. But this is a unique effect that you can't get anywhere else, basically, other than Ugly Tooth, and you can just get that speed back by buying other speed items. Snail, I think, is going to keep you alive a lot. I think it's really, really good. So I'm going to put it in S tier. I think you should buy this every time you see it. It also is a unique, so it pulls it out of the shop for future shops, which is great. And overall, I think that Snail is maybe one of the more controversial picks for S tier, but I have found that that item just helps a lot with your survivability. Spicy Sauce gives you +3 max HP and gives any consumables that you pick up a 25% chance to explode for 10 damage. So this really depends on the cost. It's not a huge, or 10 damage, or rather, explode for your health in damage. This really depends on the cost. It's not a huge benefit, so whenever you think that +3 max HP is a good ratio for Spicy Sauce, you should pick it. So I'm going to put it in B tier, not because it has real downsides, but because the downside is just the cost that you have to pay in order to purchase it. I think most of the time you're going to end up buying that item. Sunglasses. That gives you 10% crit chance for -1 armor. I think this is a really solid item. I'm going to put it in B tier again. -1 armor is a real downside, but of course, +10% crit chance is great. Lots of characters are going to gain quite a bit of additional damage out of that +10% crit chance. Tentacle. We've got +3% crit chance and 20% chance to heal 1 whenever you kill an enemy with a critical hit. You get this for winning the game with Lich. So, confession time, I haven't actually bothered to win the game with Lich yet, so I haven't played with the Tentacle yet. That said, looking at the stats, I think this is very similar to other C-tier items, or in that it's mostly filler. The amount of healing that you get from that is going to be fairly minimal. Because you only heal 1 HP. 3% crit chance is a very small value, so I think most of the time you're not going to bother spending on this, but if you want the crit chance or the healing, then it's great. Wheelbarrow gives you 16 harvesting for -1 armor, and I'm going to say that Wheelbarrow is either A or S tier. Wheelbarrow, if you see it before round 10, I guess it's actually, we'll put it in B tier. But I suppose the reason I'm putting it in B tier is that if you see it before round 10, you should buy it 100% of the time. If you see it rounds like 12 to 14, you may or may not want to buy it. You should look at the cost in the shop. And if you see it after that, you won't buy it. But generally speaking, if you see Wheelbarrow early, buy it always. Buy it over pretty much everything else, with the exception of some other early harvesting items. Early harvesting is really, really strong, and you should get that basically every time. Alright, Whetstone. So Whetstone gives you 4% lifesteal and -3 knockback. Secretly, -3 knockback is actually an advantage, and I talk about this quite a bit in my soldier guide, so if you haven't watched the soldier guide, then you should watch that. If you're using lifesteal at all, even if you're not really using lifesteal, Whetstone is really good. I could definitely see putting it in S tier. It's one of the most efficient items in the game in terms of healing. Like, it will give you so much healing compared to every other item, with the exception maybe of like weird food. That for a single item you're just getting a tremendous amount of value. I only am putting it in A tier because some characters don't really attack, or don't attack frequently, or are using like slow melee weapons and can't get a ton of value out of lifesteal, but if you can lifesteal at all, buy this every time you see it. Finally, White Flag gives you +5 harvesting for -5% enemies. So I guess technically there's one character or two. So +5 harvesting and -5% enemies appear on the field. I guess technically there's like 1 or 2 characters that can buy the White Flag. I think this one rounds down close enough to F tier that I'm going to put it in F tier. Losing 5% enemies is losing 5% of your money and XP for the entire rest of the game. And it doesn't really help you to survive to lose enemies. So only if you are a character that generates its money entirely not through killing stuff, basically the streamer is the only one that I can think of, would you ever want to consider enemy reduction items. And I think in general you should just avoid them. You will do better in the game if your heuristic is just never reduce enemies, always increase enemies whenever you see it, which is why we've got Gentle Alien in S tier and White Flag in F tier. Alright, so that does it for the tier 2 items. I hope you all have enjoyed this. I'm just going to quickly scroll down the list, or slowly scroll down the list so you can see kind of where everything landed. Here's our S tier items, our A tier items, our B tier items, our C tier items, our D tier items, and our F tier items. As always, my friends, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and if so, please do feel free to comment and help me get it in front of more people if you want to share it on Steam. I should also mention I've been posting my class guides in a guide on Steam, so if you want to go upvote that, that would be helpful just to have more people see the class guides. And, of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more of this and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, folks. GG.